Hello and welcome to the channel. Today I'm talking about a self-compassion mindfulness exercise. So this is a very useful thing to learn if you're dealing with any kind of a myriad of types of anxiety, but I do want to look at it specifically in the context of perfectionism and how to heal perfectionism, both because perfectionistic tendencies tie very easily to many different kinds of anxiety, so it's very broadly applicable, and also because I tend towards perfectionism. It's something I've kind of struggled with and I relate to, and so I have an easier time talking about it. The roadmap for this video today is I want to talk a bit about perfectionism, what it is, where it comes from, some basic tips for kind of dealing with it or finding a healthy balance with that trait, and then I want to get into this specific technique for mindfulness and self-compassion. So I'll put some timestamps in. If you're really interested in just one part, you can skip around. I also have this video here on how to practice mindfulness in everyday life. So if you just want to learn more about what mindfulness is and really how to practice it, you can check that out as well. And I think that's all for the intro. Let's get into it. So first off, I want to stress that perfectionism is a trait. It's not a mental disorder. So having perfectionistic tendencies is not out and out a bad thing. In a lot of ways, it's very good, right? We want people who have high standards, who are going to try their best to get things done a very specific way. That is ultimately a neutral thing. It gets to be a bad thing when it leads to us treating ourselves badly or having unrealistic expectations and kind of beating ourselves up over it. So for what it's worth, the goal is not to destroy that tendency within ourselves. It's to manage it and find a decent balance. And I suppose it depends how you define your terms. If you mean perfectionism as in the extreme form, where you literally will never be satisfied with something or yourself unless it is absolutely perfect, then yes, that is unhealthy. I think of perfectionism as being on a scale. I like to strive for things to be more perfect, but as long as there's a little bit of wiggle room and I know I can forgive myself for not doing things perfectly, I think there's a balance there that can be okay. So it does depend on how you're defining your terms. But for the purposes of this video, perfectionism is not out and out a bad thing. It's something we're trying to balance. So with that in mind, the danger comes when we develop a very conditional sense of self-worth, meaning that I only value myself as a person if I am meeting these extremely high standards. Whether or not I'm valuable or someone who deserves being loved and taken care of depends on my achievements and the outcome of my work throughout the day. That's a very scary place to be, because then if something goes wrong, and there are many things all the time outside my control, including to a certain extent my own emotions and my own mental capacity, then when things go wrong, it means that I'm no longer a valuable person, and that leads to tremendous amounts of anxiety and a strong desire for control. So perfectionism usually comes from a place of having low self-esteem, or it can also be linked to a desire for control. Often the two kind of go together. We want to control the way other people feel about us or think about us, and so we try to meet this certain standard to guarantee that they won't be able to find any fault with us. And obviously there's a logical fallacy here, because even if we are perfect, other people can think and feel about us however they want. We can never control other people's thoughts and feelings. And this naturally leads to perfectionistic thinking being very stressful, because no matter how hard you try, at the end of the day, some person can still dislike you. If your desire for belonging and your sense of self-worth is tied to the need to guarantee that other people will always respond a certain way to you, you will definitely be anxious and ultimately unhappy, because you will not achieve the goal you're striving for. It's not possible. So some common traits that often go with a perfectionistic personality trait are rigid thinking, competitiveness, being very sensitive to feedback, feelings of shame or guilt, being very critical of others, and being angry when something doesn't go according to plan. So for myself, I naturally, like from childhood, tend towards a good handful of the things in that list. It's very easy for me to feel guilty. It's just the way I'm wired. And from childhood on, as I've grown older, I've been really growing more conscious of that tendency and trying to balance it so that I don't feel inordinate amounts of guilt for things that really are outside my control or are not my fault. I'm very sensitive to feedback. If someone gives me a criticism, I take it really hard, and I know that about myself, and so I've been kind of trying to work on that. So these kinds of things, there's an element of acknowledging the way we are, the way we naturally incline, and then working on that and not feeling trapped. I spent a period of time once I became a little more self-aware, feeling kind of embarrassed that I had these struggles, that I naturally tended to feel guilty easily or had a hard time with criticism. And I felt like, oh, I'm just too sensitive and I'm too perfectionistic and there are these things about myself that I really dislike. And I've moved on from that now to feeling like, no, these are ultimately good. Every trait about my personality has a good and a bad side. Like, it's all about finding balance, and it helps me be a lot more merciful to myself, which is why I really want to stress that perfectionism is a personality trait. It is not a mental disorder and is not out and out a bad thing. And so with that, some basic advice, just in general, if you're trying to overcome perfectionism, try something or maybe multiple things that you are not inherently good at. I mean, pick up a hobby that's brand new to you, where you're not in an atmosphere that's competitive because you know you're at the bottom of the barrel, and just work from there. I have a lot of videos talking about theater and performance because I have a degree in theater, and for myself and my personality traits, studying theater was amazing for me. You spend so much time doing new, awkward, really goofy exercises with a whole group of people who are also kind of new and learning how to get out of their shells. And it just gives you permission to make mistakes over and over and over again. It's a very safe environment. And my time studying that at college, I really believe just changed my life and did a whole lot for my personality, gave me a ton of freedom. So I'm a big advocate for the arts in general. I love theater in particular, but the concept of picking something that you're not inherently good at and exploring that and giving yourself permission to fail, like one safe space. Maybe you're going to have a hard time making mistakes at work. That's a pretty scary place to make mistakes. So start somewhere very low key without a lot of high stakes, and know that if you destroy this clay pot in pottery class, it doesn't matter. It's fine. It's good. And then we can teach ourselves that it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to be imperfect. So that's the first thing. Find some area or add some area in your life where you can deliberately be imperfect regularly, like at least once a week. And then really try not to be perfectionistic about healing your perfectionism. That sounds a little funny, but again, that's also why I stress that it's not a mental disorder. It's not like we have to attack it and wipe it out completely. If you are perfectionistic, it's because there's a little piece of you that is hardwired that way, and it's not a bad thing. We're just going to work on coming back to center very gently. We have to be kind to ourselves. That's usually the whole root of the issue, is that ultimately we're kind of bullying ourselves when we don't meet the expectations we set in place. So we need to be kind to ourselves. Which brings me to this self-compassion mindfulness exercise. Because the root of what we're really trying to heal, we want to learn to be a little bit more grounded, a little more present in reality for ourselves, rather than worrying too much about what other people think of us or how we're coming across. We want to learn to be present where we are right now, because people are really drawn to the authentic more than the perfect. So this will help us achieve what we actually want, which is to be a little more accepted and a little more connected to other people and a little more accepting of ourselves. So we want to learn to be grounded in reality, and we want to learn to have some self-compassion. So this specific exercise, I want to credit to Tara Brach. She's a psychologist and she specializes in meditation, mindfulness, and ideas of compassion. So she teaches a practice or a technique called RAIN, and it stands for recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. And it's actually pretty straightforward to understand, but it's a little harder to put into practice. So with this, and definitely with any form of practicing mindfulness, if you're new to it, you have to be kind of steady and patient. Just do a little bit every day and it'll start to get more natural and create more of a habit. And the first two elements, recognize and allow, are the basic traits for any mindfulness exercise. You want to recognize your current state of being. So if you're doing an actual like meditation or a mindfulness exercise very deliberately, like you're cutting time out of your day in order to work on this, what you're going to do is find some quiet place to sit and then find something deliberate to focus on. So maybe you'll focus on your breath. That's a really common one. Or you could listen to, if you're outside especially, maybe you want to just take in the sounds around you. But you're going to find something physical that you can see or feel or hear and just focus on that. We're trying to connect ourselves to our exact experience. And because we're human beings, we will probably focus on that and then notice a lot of other things that we are naturally feeling. So we're trying to recognize, we're like focusing on a specific experience. And in doing that, we may also notice, oh, I feel really anxious or excited, or maybe I feel sad today. Or if it's maybe a fairly average day, maybe you just feel kind of tired or kind of happy. So you're going to try and recognize what you're feeling. And the second one is maybe like the hardest and most important, and that's allow. So we need to not judge our experience. Oftentimes, if we stop and we take stock of our emotions, we're not happy about them. Like, it's easy to feel embarrassed or judgmental about our own emotional state because we want to be happy all the time, especially if we're trying to be perfect. Seems like perfect people are always happy. That's not a human way to be. That isn't in reality. So we need to allow ourselves to have the whole range of emotions. So if I'm doing an exercise and I stop and I'm trying to focus on my breath and I realize in doing so that I feel really angry, then that will naturally lead me to the next step. And I realize that maybe I'm actually feeling really irritated or angry about something. First thing I need to do is be okay with that. If I don't want to compound my own feelings of anger with anxiety or judgment about it. It's okay. Okay, I'm feeling angry. So that'll lead me to the next one, which is to investigate. We want to calmly ask ourselves, where's that anger coming from? Again, that's why we need to be calm and kind of free about it. We ask ourselves where it's coming from. So let's say it's something small that just happened at work. I had a really irritating encounter with a coworker. I'm still feeling angry about it. Then I can ask myself, well, how deep does this go? How important is it? Is it something I can just let go? Because in mindfulness, the goal is usually to find a peaceful place to sit. We just need to allow ourselves not to get there all the time. So if it's something small and I say, okay, I'm going to let that go, I don't need to hold on to that, then I can go back to the beginning. I recognize how I feel. Maybe I'm not angry anymore. Maybe I feel much calmer. Okay, great. I allow that to be there. I can investigate if there's anything else going on. Nurture comes, especially if you're dealing with a trend of anxiety or something. Nurture is going to be where we look at something running much deeper. So let's say I'm running through this exercise. I'm recognizing my situation. I'm trying to be very calm and allowing it. But let's say I realize I'm very anxious. And if you're struggling with anxiety, you probably will be. Then I say, okay, well, where's that coming from? And oftentimes it'll come if we keep asking and we're trying to be open and we dig a little bit into ourselves, we'll find out like, oh, I'm really worried about what this person thinks of me. And then you say, okay, well, why are you worried what they think of you? And you go a little bit deeper and you'll probably come to finding some vulnerable part of yourself. Oh, well, ultimately I feel anxious because I'm afraid they won't like me because I don't actually think I'm a likable person. I don't actually think I'm fun. If they knew who I really was, they wouldn't want to talk to me. These kinds of things are usually, if we're struggling with anxiety, there is some part of us deep down that's really vulnerable and feels really scared and like it needs to be protected. And so that leads us to the last letter, the N, which is for nurture. And we want to think of a way to really love ourselves in that place. And this is really powerful because it allows us to look at our defensive strategies, like the anxiety and the desire to be perfectionistic and control things. Those are just defenses. We're just trying to protect ourselves. So if we can go down to what needs protecting and then take care of it instead of being ashamed of it or kind of beating ourselves up, it heals from the inside out. So instead of saying to myself, I need to stop being perfectionistic, which is just trying to like pank down this outer protective layer, we need to gently and very kindly work our way into understanding ourselves a little better and say, okay, what is this perfectionistic tendency trying to protect? Which part of me doesn't feel safe, and how can I love that part of myself? So you can do this in a very deliberate exercise format, like I said, almost like a meditation, but you can also apply it in the middle of your day. And both of them take practice. But if you get good at it, then when you start to feel anxiety creeping up, you can develop a habit to right then and there saying, oh, I now feel anxious. Why do I feel anxious? Is there a part of myself I can really nurture? And so you can make it like a long practice where you're really taking time to sit with yourself. And you can also break it up into like really small experiences throughout your day, where if you have an encounter with someone that makes you feel anxious, you take a minute, you say, that made me feel really anxious because I'm worried they won't like me. And you take a moment in that and you just take care of yourself a little bit. You say, I know I don't need to be afraid. I know I am a worthwhile person, whether or not this individual chooses to see that. And I'm going to be okay in this moment. I'm going to let it be okay. And as you're practicing this, you may continue to feel anxious. You almost certainly will for a while. We need to be very patient, very gentle with ourselves, not expect these things to go away right away. Especially if we really have a lot of anxiety built up, it means we have a lot of vulnerabilities that are going to take a long time to heal, and that's okay. We need to be patient with ourselves all the way in every part of it and not beat ourselves up for having a struggle. That's fine. That's the human I mean, welcome to the human race. Everybody has struggles. Not everyone deals with perfectionism or anxiety, but these days a lot of people do. And even if they don't have that problem, they have some other ones that have a little more to do with their natural makeup as a person. So I hope that makes sense. It's a beautiful exercise. It takes a lot of patience and sort of determination to really make it stick. Of course, if you're dealing with like really intense anxiety, if you're having panic attacks, if you're really depressed, you might want to seek out counseling as well. That's very good advice. And see if you can maybe find someone who specializes in perfectionism if that's what you're dealing with, or maybe social anxiety, depending on what it is. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you find this content helpful for practicing mindfulness or overcoming anxiety, whatever it may be that you're looking for. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you like this content or you are curious to hear more of what I put out every week, go ahead and subscribe. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time.